When the idea was sort of had, I sat down with Elena and took her story. I gave that story to each of the artists so that they knew where this was coming from. And then I took 7 big matchboxes and covered them in white paper. And I gave them to Elena, and I took 7. Because we were, treating this as a project we were doing together. It was, in a sense, part of the therapeutic process, actually, was to turn her capacity to tell her own story into something more and bigger and more powerful in order to be able to help other people. We went away and I said, look, we've got 7 stages here, and I'd like you to write on each box what part of your experience you think should be inside it. So the first box was always called Hopes and Dreams and Aspirations, and it was about the fact that we all have those when we're little, and we all want things for ourselves. From the beginning of the journey, you understand that this is a girl who comes from somewhere with no access to the kind of information that might be helpful to her in avoiding this journey. And you move on and you look and you see her with a little suitcase, and there's a woman standing over her, slightly sinister looking. And then as you go out, he says, "Would you like to go to England?" she said. And you go through into a dark container, which is just sound. And it's a lot of repetitive noise. It's about the monotony, but also the violence and the disruption of the journey. And you leave and you go into the uniform, where you look through holes and you see yourself reflected on top of the body of a girl in these prostitutes' weeds. And it's the part of her story where she says, "I put on these clothes and I knew that I wasn't me anymore. It was no longer me." And it's the second removal of identity. You start with giving over the passport, which is your national status, your safety in the world, your papers, your identity papers. Then after that you go into a space called the bedroom, the workplace, and it's a sort of facsimile of the kinds of room that these women are imprisoned in. And the bed is filthy and graffitied on, and it's on hydraulics, quite a sort of angry, motion as it goes up and down, as though someone's having sex on it, and there's a terrible sort of violence and anger in it. And there's a mirror with the number of men, written in lipstick, because it's between 40 and 60 sometimes a day, which is inconceivable. And it smells really, really bad. And then you walk through a curtain of condoms, and watching people's reactions to coming out of that, it really hits people, very deep down. You come out of that into a very clean, almost neutral space, which is called the customer. And the point about this container is not to point the finger, not to judge, but just to say, look, it's any of us. It's just ordinary people who buy these services, and whether they know or not about the consenting nature of it or not is part of the question. You come out of that and you come to Anish Kapoor's sculpture, which is it's called Stigma. You look into it, and at first it looks as though it's just a flat disc on a wall, and then you realise that it goes beyond. And you just stand there and get pulled into this void, which is how he developed the idea of stigma. And then you go around the other side and you see the end of the void. And if you stand in a particular place, it just seems to come at you. So it's quite a performative piece in a way, and it's the only abstract piece in the installation. And then they go into the last container, and it was called this the language container. I just wanted to have Elena's voice. I wanted it to be her, and I wanted her to be telling the truth.
I said, "I can't believe it." I said, "How am I going to make this money?"
And then on the other side, for the words to be saying, "No, you're not telling the truth." Although those determinations aren't taken directly from her Home Office interview, they are taken all from trafficked women's interviews.
I start to cry and I say, "I cannot do sex. I can't do it."
I never expected people to listen to the whole thing, like 15 minutes, and they listen because she's so extraordinary. And the way in which she tells her story is so extraordinary. And I feel as though if you could somehow get her voice into everybody's head in the world, people would know so much more, and so much could be done with that story. She tells it with a smile on her voice. She has rebuilt herself in a new way, and she's often happy and fulfilled. And I remember her saying something very touching to me once. She said, you know, I can remember getting on the tube and going to work. She works in a law firm. And she said, you know, finally I was normal. I was on the tube. I was surrounded by my fellow workers. No one was looking at me in a weird way. I could just relax. You know, in a sense, the tube was her, you know, it was a birth canal for her, going from one life into another one, and suddenly feeling that she had herself back.